I arrived when Graham Blewett was the acting prosecutor. Graham was a former prosecutor from Australia. He was the deputy, eventually was the deputy prosecutor.
And then you had Richard for a couple of years, and then he recommended Louise Arbour, and then she was followed by Carla, and then Serge.
Correct.
Were you there when Serge came up?
Yes.
As you look back during your 17 years with the ICTY and the 4 chief prosecutors.
General impressions, formed having worked under all of them in the broadest sense. Mm-hmm. Judge Goldstone was absolutely essential to our survival. He was an astute political player. He understood the issues of management of a new tribunal and funding, and he was quite adroit at running the political interference, and I consider one of his greatest contributions was that we managed to survive for 2 years under, at all. Louise Arbour was his replacement. I think she was a brilliant lawyer. I think she was she was a very humane person. She was very smart, and she was very courageous. And she developed and had no hesitation in making sure that we would use our full authority in terms of what we were entitled to use. I'll give you an example. It turned around an issue, I mentioned it yesterday. There was a regime where states had an international obligation to comply with requests from the tribunal. That was a legal responsibility. And when it came to cooperation with states that were complicit in the crimes, of course you could anticipate that there would be no cooperation. In the case that I was prosecuting, that I took to Louise, which was in the Blaskic case, Croatia was not cooperating with my request for assistance. I was trying to establish their involvement in the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina in order to establish that grave breaches of the Geneva Convention had been committed. And so finally, in complete frustration, Croatia would say, "We're still looking for the documents. Yes, you'll get them in due course." That we were being slow-rolled. And I then drafted a subpoena ducis tecum. I took that subpoena ducis tecum to Louise, and I said to her, because I didn't want to surprise her, I'd like to file this. And she, without any hesitation, said, "We're entitled to do it, file it." Mm-hmm. And we filed it, and we had enormous litigation on that. So that was, Louise was somebody who was very robust in asserting our rights and our authority. Then Carla came. Carla was, my perception is, her greatest contribution was she was a bulldog when it came to going after the fugitives. She pursued them relentlessly and fearlessly, and as a result, during her tenure, I think we had huge success in terms of capturing fugitives. And Serge came at the end of my tenure. So Serge's contribution, he was exquisite when it came to managing the political side of the equation. He's a very nice fellow, as you know. When he came, I said to him, I saw him right at the beginning of his tenure, I said, "I have no doubt that Karadzic and Mladic will be arrested during your tenure, and you should make sure that those cases are ready to proceed." I had had those cases. Frankly, I had had the responsibility of those cases, but they languished because I was constantly in trial, and I had other responsibilities and couldn't pay attention to them. And then I was entering my last trial, so I could see the handwriting on the wall. So Serge picked up the challenge right away, and they were properly staffed, and I think they will be very successful prosecutions. I was involved in drafting the Karadzic and Mladic indictments. I conducted the Rule 61 hearings with Karadzic and Mladic, and I shudder to think what would have happened had they turned themselves in right after the Rule 61 hearings, because time turned out to be our ally. You know, they were digging their own graves by remaining fugitives. We collected more evidence. We had people who, you know, we developed additional witnesses. We developed additional linkage to those crimes.
Karadzic is arrested in 2008. Were you there then?
Yes, of course.
Were you curious as hell to what this guy looked like?
Well, I knew what he looked like. I didn't quite recognize him with his disguise.
Yeah, when he came into
It was
court.
great.
When he came into court.
It was great, yeah. I was curious.
Yeah. What a look.
He looked just like he did once he got cleaned up and shaved. He looked like Karadzic that we all knew.
Karadzic is arrested in 2008. Were you there then?
Yes, of course.
Were you curious as hell to what this guy looked like?
Well, I knew what he looked like. I didn't quite recognize him with his disguise.
Yeah, when he came into
It was
court.
great.
When he came into court.
It was great, yeah. I was curious.
Yeah.
You know, I read considerably about the Holocaust because it interested me, but, you know, I knew about the Nuremberg trials, but there was no hope that that would ever be resurrected when I was going to law school.
Right.
So I didn't, you know, ever think about it. Therefore, when the opportunity came, you know, I jumped at the chance.